another episode of the Framing the Issue podcast. I'm your co-host, Aaron Kersey, and I'm here with Morgan Smith. And today we have a fun one for you folks. We have land development. We have two industry experts coming in to break down how this piece of the process goes, and I'm excited to get started. So let me introduce my first guest. We have Morgan Rushnell coming in. She's currently the principal at Line in Place, but she's worked in the industry for a very long time and has seen many different facets of it. So she's a Florida State and a North Carolina State alum. And Morgan, if you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. So I come here from Florida, hailing from Florida, and I've been here since 2019, working in land development. I've worked with MI Homes, a publicly traded builder and private builder in Beau Wright in downtown Charlotte, and then recently launched my own firm, land development firm, this past fall called Line in Place, focusing on pocket neighborhoods in the Charlotte MSA.
Fantastic. And Morgan, you want to introduce Mike?
Yeah. So our second guest today is Mike Kissel. He is from the Chicago area, and he is an Illinois State University alumni. And he currently works for Mattamy Homes and has for the last 6 years. But he has been around in the land development area for quite some time now. He's currently director of land development at Mattamy. So Mike, if you want to give us a few words about yourself.
Sure. Mike Kissel. As you mentioned, I'm originally from the Chicago area, got smart and moved away from the snow. Unlike Morgan here, who came from the Sunshine State, but been in Charlotte since 2005. Originally cut my teeth on the home building side of the business with a tour with Centex Homes. And in 2005, got the opportunity to join the land development team with Standard Pacific Homes at the time, and been loving it ever since. So been through a couple of different companies. One of the ones after Standard Pacific, I went to Ontario Builders, and then currently with Mattamy.
Well, nice. So we've gone over quite a few topics on this podcast so far. We started with what land acquisition was. We moved to entitlements. We went to what site planning was. But today we really get into the development of the start of your project. So my first question, because let's be honest, I really don't know much of what I'm talking about here, and I'm just learning with the viewers. But once you close on a raw piece of land, what is the very first thing that happens before any of the dirt even gets moved?
You have a beer. First and foremost, you definitely have a beer first to celebrate.
That's right.
And then it's about bringing people together out on site. I think it starts with that pre-construction meeting, and that's inspectors, that's your site contractor, your civil engineer, everybody getting out on site and saying, okay, guys, now we need to get to work. What's the first thing that we need to do?
Yeah, typically when we get it, it's, you've kind of gone through the different elements of land development so far. You've talked about, buying the land, and then you had the engineers on last time where they talked about putting stuff down on paper. That's kind of at the point that we get it. And that's what Morgan's talking about, where we have a site meeting, bringing everybody out, and it's everybody that's going to build what's on that piece of paper. And that's our rules and regs and our game plan for the site. And that's what we go after first.
So you guys already have, like, the plans are already made and given to you guys. So now you guys are like, all right, we're down and we're doing the dirty work now. Let's get this site ready to build some houses on.
Now we have to make it real.
Yeah, exactly. So speaking of those plans, though, can you explain what the grading plan is? Because that's like one of the first things that you're doing, right? Is putting it on grade. Can you explain a little bit more about what the grading plan is in the blueprint and how essential it is?
I'll take this one. I guess start off grading plan. I kind of, on the set of CDs, you have two things. You have a site plan and a grading plan, and then there's details that fall out underneath each one of those. To me, the grading plan is the 3D part of it. A site plan is the 2D. It's kind of like when you go on Google Maps and you're going to look at a piece of land, it's just flat as can be. That's your site plan. It's going to get you all your information for what the flat parts and pieces are. Now, when you get into the grading plan, that's going to bring in the topo, right? That's your favorite word around here now.
Bringing back another vocabulary word, folks.
There you go. So you look at topography, and it's all the characteristics are driven through the topography of the land. So it's your slopes, and as it was mentioned previously, water runs downhill, right? So we got to make sure our storm drains and our sewer lines go to their appropriate place, and that's all embedded into that grading plan and site plan process. That grading plan gives you the 3D approach to it. I don't know if there's anything
I mean, it also helps dictate the organization, how you're going to move through the site. So it helps you determine what goes in first. What is the deepest utility? Like, is it stormwater? Is it sewer in that particular circumstance? So it helps dictate how you move through that site, and then how much it's going to cost to do it and how long it's going to take you to do it. So dirt is the leading edge in my mind for everything in land development.
With that.
Yeah, I mean, we discussed moving dirt on the last episode quite a bit with Robin Ward about how much dirt is actually being moved and the cost of it. I mean, it's not cheap to come in there and move the dirt with how much you need. So can you explain a little bit more about, I mean, in y'all's eyes, which they told us, which they're like, behind the scenes, the beginning, and they're like, well, this is what we think how much it's going to be to move the dirt and what it is. I mean, you guys are actually doing it. Can you explain a little bit more about what that cost is and how much you're essentially moving?
Well, I think it's just a good rule of thumb. Anytime you touch dirt, it costs you money. And when we talk about cut and fill out on site, that's a good term for you. So cut, you're digging out, right? Fill, you're piling it up. But every time you cut dirt out of the ground, there's actually something called we call it a fluff factor. What's the specific term? Shrink swell. There we go.
There's a technical term.
So when you take it out, you take it out of the ground, it's compacted down. But when you pull it out, it's something like 15 to 25% more that you then have to place. So it isn't a straight 1-for-1 factor. So it's every time you're moving it, you're not just moving what you took out of the ground, you're moving actually a little bit more.
And so I'm glad you brought up cut and fill, because that was actually on the note sheet. So I'm glad we got into that. But what happens when you get the cut and fill wrong? How does that affect the site? How does that affect the finance of the project? What happens?
So my initial reaction when you asked that question was cha-ching. Because essentially, and Morgan kind of was talking about when we look at dirt, that's going to dictate what it is. You only want to touch it one time. If you're handling dirt multiple times, you're going to run that cost up. And getting it wrong means you're either going to have to haul that dirt off, you're going to have to make some sort of adjustment on the site. We do a lot of what's called raising and lowering the site globally. So if we have, say, overall, the whole neighborhood has an extra foot of dirt on it, can we incorporate that into our design? Can we make that happen by just saying, hey, we're going to raise everything up a foot, or vice versa, lowering it down a foot? Now, you're tying in the fixed points with sewer and water, so sometimes that's not always practical. But those are kind of questions that you have to start asking yourself when you get into that unbalanced situation with your cut and fill.
And so we were talking about that pre-construction meeting earlier, right? To make sure that doesn't get executed wrong, is that usually figured out in that pre-construction meeting, or is that one of those things where you have the pre-construction meeting, everyone discusses this is what's going to happen, but then as they're going along and actually doing what they're supposed to, they're having to, I guess, adapt to how that cut and fill is going?
I mean, I think that discussion happens long before we get out on it. Better happen long before we get out on site. So the engineers are looking at the grades, right? They're able to model in CAD or whatever program they're using to figure out how you can balance the site, which means you're not hauling dirt off, you're not having to bring dirt in. So you want a balanced site. If you find that you are out of balance, something went wrong, or you encountered dirt or rock, something that was an unforeseen circumstance, and then it's just a matter of what are we going to do with that? If it's excess dirt, can we mound it up? Is there some way that we can use it out on site that's a benefit to the end users? So it's just a matter of being able to creatively pivot through those unforeseen circumstances as they come up on site.
So when you're doing all that, the stormwater, I mean, how do you manage any of the stormwater that's coming through?
Stages. So you'll see in a set of plans, and it's interesting, on a set of construction drawings is what we call them. It's the plan set for the overall neighborhood. When I originally started in the industry, it might have been this thick, maybe ½ inch thick. Nowadays, you can get a full inch worth of plans because there's so much detail that's baked into those. And one of those is that you'll have different stages of stormwater and how you manage it, because your site's going to change. You might have 30 feet of cut on a site. So you're literally going to change that topography from up here minus 30 feet. Well, you're not just going to, water's just not going to fall in a pit. It's got to flow. So we have to manage that 30-foot reduction in stages. And so it's planned out in the construction drawings through those stages, how you handle stormwater. And then ultimately your end design is that you end up with, some sort of pond or sand filter, some sort of final treatment point for that water. It lives on with the project forever.
So when you're, cutting the dirt, all the things you talk about stages, I mean, you're building, like you're doing one stage and you're getting that cut graded and you're building houses before you even move on to another stage to cut the dirt.
What you're going to do is plan out your development, right? So you're going to do it in one phase or you're going to do multiple phases. So what you just explained there might be a multiple phase situation where you might be heavy on heavy on dirt on one phase, but then on the next phase, which you're not going to tackle for another year, maybe you're short on dirt. So you have to do a little proactive planning on that. What's the best way to handle that material? Some of that may be placing it in the general area it's going to be, or maybe you don't have access to it and you are going to have to move dirt twice and it's going to be stockpiled on that second phase for a while. Those are all kind of things that really at the beginning of the project, you're going to sit down and kind of plan through on paper and tackle it the best economical way that you can.
And so we've kind of been talking about the different, wet terrain, dry terrain, stormwater, sewage, and whatnot. But what's the difference between a wet and a dry utility? And why do wet utilities typically get installed first?
It's all about the depth, right? So typically the wet utilities are the deepest utilities. So if it's wet, it's a wet utility. So we're talking about water, we're talking about stormwater, we're talking about sewage. All of those are the wet utilities. Anything that's considered a dry utility is typically your telecom or gas line, if that's involved. So there are cover regulations where when I say cover, I mean the amount of dirt that needs to go over a pipe in order for it to be safe for you to traverse across it, whether or not that's a road or a sidewalk or anything else. So typically those wet utilities go first because they're the deepest, and then you work your way towards the surface.
Okay. And so being able to install those, you probably have to go through a little bit of coordination with cities, municipalities. What does that process look like from y'all's side?
So once again, it starts with a pre-construction meeting. Okay. A lot of that's tackled in on that meeting. You're going to talk with your inspectors. Every municipality is going to have an inspector that's going to monitor work that you do. A lot of times, since we're doing, miles of pipe, they might not be there all the time. They might get a sample of it, but they're going to be the ones that you're communicating with. And a lot of times there's a safety factor built in too. You're not going to tap into an active live water line and turn on water that day, right? There's some precautionary measures that they're going to want you to do. And so those items are handled through the inspector. And that's, like I said, you have that start off meeting, but then there's multiple meetings with each step that you go through. The tie on to a water line is one of the main ones. Activation's another one when you get the whole system in. And then of course there's going to be kind of milestone activities that they're going to want to see in there too, with hydrants and what have you.
And what happens when you're too far away from the line or the line isn't long enough?
To tap into, like, for example, like I want to put a neighborhood in X parcel and let's say the sewer line is 5 parcels away. Mm-hmm. Is that what you mean? So what's going to happen is you're going to do a cost benefit analysis. Is you're going to say, okay, if I draw a straight line from my parcel to reach that sewer line, how many easements am I going to have to get out there and go get? Can this be accomplished in the right of way instead? And you're basically going to say, how much is it going to cost me to get out there and either purchase easements or run the long distance around to work in the right of way in order to tap into a public utility? There are other strategies that you can do. Like, let's say if we're talking about sewer right now, if you can't get to a sewer manhole, a public sewer manhole, you can do sewer on site, right? So you can have a private system that's on site that's very similar to like an individual septic that you might have for your house, but it's on a community scale. And that means you don't have to tie into a public septic or sewer line.
What's the cost benefit? Or is there a cost benefit to doing private versus public?
Yes and no. I think it certainly is more expensive. Yeah, they all have their costs, and they all have their challenges, right? So if you're going through a situation where you got to go get 5 to 10 easements, like that's a cost and a time and a time suck because you have to negotiate with each individual parcel owner. But on the flip side, if you're doing, a private community system, you have to go through a year-long permitting process. So there are trade-offs. They're just different types of systems that you'd have to evaluate.
Yeah. So you guys have to work with the city a lot, municipalities with stormwater utilities and all that. So what do you guys normally do to manage to work with them? I mean, how does that typically work out?
You talking with as far as like approvals for if you're gonna do a private system?
Yeah. Well, not just the private system, but like in general, because you have to connect to their city water and their storm drains, everything of that nature. And there's some places like in Gaston County where it's kind of complicated to be connecting with some cities right now because they don't have the capacity. I mean, how does that normally work out for you guys?
A lot of that's going to be vetted out earlier on in the process with the engineers. Typically, if you're going into development, you've got your CDs done. You've figured out all those obstacles because you basically have taken on the burden of producing this product now, right? So the engineers are going to go through, and there's the first thing you start off with when you look at a piece of property is there's water and sewer, right? So you're going to reach out to the municipality, ask them, do you have it available? They may not have it available, but they may also say, it's not available now, but you're in our service area, so you can't do the private septics or treatment centers. You have to extend their line. So those are communications that you're going to have up front as you're in the development phase of your CDs, and that's usually handled through the engineer and the owner.
So one of the things that was asked to AI, trying to learn about this stuff. Yes, I use AI. Something that came up was a lift station. So what is a lift station and why is it so important to have one? And I know we were talking about working with municipalities and cities and whatnot, but what does that do? How does that affect a homeowner or even an HOA?
Yeah, I think it's a really great question. It's funny. So coming from developing in Florida and then coming up to the Carolinas, lift stations were always just a part of underwriting in Florida, right? You have no fall, you have no topography in order to get your slopes for gravity, right, to go downhill. So what you have to do is everything gets pumped, and that's the purpose of a lift station. It's a really big machine that pumps sewer uphill.
Okay.
So bucks grade, right? So if you have a site right here in North Carolina and you don't have what's called enough fall, you don't have enough slope on your gravity sewer line, what you could do is put in a lift station, and that could be a private lift station or a public lift station. You can install it, and then it will pump that sewage up and either over a hill or over a hump to get it back down to where it needs to drain into.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of times it's your topography that's going to dictate that, right? You think of communities around the lake, a lot of those will have pump stations, mainly because you got a lot of hills and valleys. So you're not going to cut through a 30-foot hill for that sanitary line that's going to be gravity fed like a traditional neighborhood.
Right.
You're going to bring it up high, and you're going to have points where it drops down. Maybe it all collects at this center point at the very bottom of the site. But the main sewer line is at the street, and that's 20 feet higher. You're then pumping to that sewer line at the street. That's another one. Or we also have low pressure systems here in Charlotte. It's another version of a pump station. It's kind of like everybody in the neighborhood has their own little mini pump at the house. We call it a grinder pit. And it pumps into a low pressure system, which is a smaller line. It's under pressure. Traditional system is a bigger line, and it's gravity flow.
And what does that do for the long-term affordability?
So with a pump station or a low pressure system, it does put a lot on either an HOA or the homeowner, because those costs that would typically be handled through your tax dollars for your sewer system in municipal or a normal gravity scenario on the municipal, the homeowner is going to have to take that on now, or the HOA is going to have to take that on. There are scenarios where lift stations are accepted and put into service through the municipality. But those, it's kind of I'm not going to call it 50-50, but more of a 70-30. Sometimes you may end up with a private, truly funded by the HOA, maintained by the HOA pump station.
So it's just all, added cost to the homeowner that house isn't even built yet, and we haven't really got into more of it. But a lot of the stuff, it's just cost that keeps adding, and we haven't even put a piece of wood in the ground anywhere. So I mean, it's just what we've been talking about, the affordability of a home, and that's so important to know that drives the cost factor of what your house. And you could have two identical houses, but on two different pieces of land, and if one has a lift station, it might cost a little bit more because of having to install that versus one that has the natural gravity.
Yeah.
It's an extra part and piece, of the whole setup. And you look at Charlotte just in general, everything that was easy to develop is taken up, right? So you're left with the ones that are more challenging. There's always going to be some sort of obstacle you have to go over with the pieces of land that are left. Pump station is one of those that comes up quite a bit now.
Yeah. And I mean, we've only discussed wet utilities. We haven't even gotten into gas, power, telecom, or any of that. So what does that coordination process look like?
That one starts, very similar to us talking about grading. That starts earlier in the process than us, showing up and ready to put a shovel in the ground. So a lot of times you are coordinating as the developer with a lot of third party companies like Duke Energy or Piedmont Natural Gas. And you're getting I try and get around. You're laughing, Mike, because it's really delicate when you start to send them your plans. Like, at what point in the process is the perfect time? Because you want the plans to be solid enough when you send them to them that they're not going to change, because they get really irritated with you if they have to change their plans. But you also don't want to wait so long that you get out on site and you need this one telephone pole moved and you haven't gone through the process with Duke Energy, and that takes months of time. So it's a delicate dance.
And that's one of those things too, when you talk about added costs that you're not seeing. So when you have a telephone pole that's maybe in the smack dab center of your entrance or future entrance, you have to move that. Duke's pretty good because you're going to have all Duke customers in there if it's a Duke line in front of your neighborhood. So they're going to move that and adjust it 9 times out of 10, no cost to you. But if you have AT&T on that line and AT&T doesn't see that it's benefit, they're going to charge you to, even though Duke's on the top of the line and AT&T has their line a little bit lower down, they're going to charge you to move their line or rehang their line. And that has not been a cheap cost these days. I mean, it could go anywhere from $80,000 to $200,000 just to move their line.
Wow.
And Duke Power's already moved it, the poles and everything associated, because it's their pole, their setup. AT&T's is hanging on there. And there's a cost, though, that a lot of people don't see. If you have to move multiple poles outside of a community, you can get in some big dollars just right off with that.
Wow. That's crazy. Okay, so with utilities with poles, because that's all overhead. What's the difference between the overhead and the underground, like cost difference? Obviously you probably want underground.
And I think that's what it is that the utility companies now, that's in their decision-making area, right? And I believe what they've done is anything that's going to be the transmission lines they're getting from one area of town to the other, that's always going to be overhead. That's their probably most efficient way of doing it. Then when you get into a community and you look for safety and aesthetics and then just what works in community, they want it underground so that line's protected. So there's a certain, rhyme or reason why they do it the way of how they do it now, with everything pretty much being direct bury.
So most of the time, new developments, it's probably 9 times out of 10, it's going to be an underground utility coming in there. Yeah.
And so, we've been talking about the home itself, but something that gets to me, we mentioned community a lot, right? There's also land development that goes into the community, not just the home itself. And you have to consider things like, what does it look like to put in a subdivision road? What does it look like to put in a clubhouse? What does that look like? What does that process look like when you're trying to put in something like a subdivision road? They found me.
Like the physical cross section of the road.
Mm-hmm.
So a sub base, right? So you'll start with grading it. You'll prepare that base. You'll put down a sub base, and then you can do your first layer, and then you'll do curb and gutter, and then your final layer. So it's usually a couple of layers that happen in between there to get from, a piece of just dirt all the way up to the top of the road.
But before we can even lay the road and do all that, you got to talk to NCDOT or municipalities and figure out, like, is it going to be an NCDOT road or is it going to be a private municipality road? And there's different requirements for both. And I know there's one thing that we really want to talk about today was the bonds. So can we dive a little bit more into that?
Sure. It's a fun part of the business, right? So kind of take both of them. We'll talk about roads and bonds together. Basically, the bonds are the assurance to the municipality that you're going to complete the work you said you were going to do. And a lot of that is required because of the process. So the process that we have to adhere to is what Morgan's talking about with the different layers of a road. So you start off a piece of just raw earth. The inspector's going to come out. He's going to roll a truck over that. We do what's called a proof roll. And they're going to keep on validating and observing you build that road section all the way up to about the 90% mark, because you can't finish it off right then and there when you start the neighborhood. You have to wait till the tail end of it. And your last step actually comes when all the houses are built. You are required to go back through and repair any damaged areas. It's a construction site. You're going to have areas that get nicked up or damaged. And once all that's done and verified through the city, you're coming then back with the asphalt crew and you're putting what's called the final lift of asphalt down. And that's all the houses are built pretty much. Your everything else in the neighborhood that needs to be finished out is getting finished out as well. This is the last step. You go down, put your final lift of asphalt, then they'll release your bonds because you've completed what you said you were going to do at that point in time. That's the most simplistic route of it. Mm-hmm. It gets into deeper details. Every municipality you go to has a different set of rules. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Well, so when I think of a bond, I think of it as almost like an insurance policy that the municipality takes out against the developer. So if the developer goes defunct or something happens mid-cycle where the developer cannot finish this work, and if it's a public road, for example, you then have a bond in place that the municipality can call on to go finish out the work that the developer couldn't otherwise finish.
So, side note, with you talking about how you have to come in after the houses are built, is that why the manholes are so high in the roads? I go through neighborhoods.
Not so.
Listen, I've gone through some where it's like, I'm going to damage my truck driving over this.
Yeah.
No, I where I work, we build amenities, and so go through some neighborhoods that aren't finished, and I'm like, you literally have to drive around it because it's like inches high, and I've always been curious as to why it stays that way. But now I know that makes sense.
If you have low profile tires on your car and you sit about 3 inches off the ground, it's probably not best to drive through your neighborhoods. But yeah, no, of course, that's what it is. It's that last 1.5 inches of asphalt that you see. So you'll run down the road and you'll see that kind of 1.5 inches along the curb. And then you also see the manholes in the middle, but that's what it is. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes they have collars too that help cushion that.
Yeah. These don't.
And I mean, a lot of these roads, when you talk about, NCDOT and whatnot, there's a lot of dedications, right? And it kind of makes it publicly maintained. Why is it so important to a home buyer or a community to have those roads publicly maintained?
I mean, similar discussion as the lift station. So if it's publicly owned and maintained, you as the HOA are not having to hold back reserves or any sort of future funds to help repair those roads if there is damage. So if you're able to, as a developer, design to the city level regulations, dedicate that road, that means that the city or the municipality or NCDOT then owns that road and you're just living on it. Right. So, but if anything happens, you can always call on them because they own and maintain the road to come and fix it.
And it's always better to have it in a municipality's hands, what have you, because it's just a sheer volume, right? They're going to be more efficient at road repairs and having that scenario set up for a cost-effective manner, as opposed to an HOA that's coming in just to do one neighborhood, or a company having to come out and do just patches here or there.
So NCDOT, has certain requirements for these roads, and then when does it get a little cross-haired with the municipalities that are trying to have a little bit more stringent requirements for you guys? I mean, where does that, have you guys dealt with that before? Yeah.
Because usually you're fronting an NCDOT road and then you're moving into Charlotte Spec or Indian Trail or whoever. usually your frontage road is a different classification than the roads inside the neighborhood.
Where those roads tie in.
So has that held you guys up in a project before of trying to figure out which requirements you have to follow?
It's that coordination. And a lot of what we do too just deals with on-site people. So this would be the time that you bring both inspectors out. You bring your NCDOT inspector out, your City of Charlotte inspector out and say, hey, we've got this conflict right here. Your set of rules says this, your set of rules says this. What's the best way? And that's, if it's not spelled out on the rules and regs and the paperwork that's already established out there, then that's typically how those situations are addressed.
Does that happen more often than not? Or do you guys feel like it's pretty straightforward for most areas?
I would say as the years go through, it's cleaned up quite a bit. Everybody, I got to give the municipalities some good kudos here in the fact that when they run across a problem, they typically, if it's a repetitive type thing, they will try to build a fix into their rules and regs.
So it seems like there's a lot of puzzle pieces going together all at once, right? I feel like through a lot of these conversations we've had with our guest, Morgan, there's always a lot of pieces going together at once, right? And so you're dealing with your wet utilities, your dry utilities, you're dealing with your roads. But on a development site, how many contractors are usually on site at once? And what happens when there's a disruption between the contractors?
I mean, that's our job, right? Ultimately, we're problem solvers. We're the ones that are going to get everybody in the room that needs to be on a phone call or out on site together, looking in, down in a hole saying, okay, guys, here's the problem. How are we going to solve it together? And that's what we have to be, professional problem solvers. That's really what we do. So, I mean, there's hundreds of people that are involved in that process. But ultimately, typically, you've got a turnkey site contractor, right? So you've got a couple of points of contact, maybe 1 or 2 points of contact that you deal with on a day-to-day. You've got your engineer teams, you got your municipality and those inspectors. So, I mean, on a day-to-day, I feel like you're about 5 to 10 people. And I try and stay on the horn at least once a week with those folks just to say, hey guys, checking in. This is what we're planning on doing. Anything that we need to be keeping an eye out for this week. Okay, great.
And just kind of elaborate on that site work contractor that Morgan's talking about, that's not a small entity. That is a huge company now. And the beauty of Charlotte is that because we're so popular and we have so much growth and what have you, we have very professional companies coming in and or local ones that have stepped up. And it's just it's a completely different industry than it was maybe 20 years ago. The level of professionalism that's brought into the industry is tremendous. You just look at the CAD, the technology that's in this equipment nowadays. You can go into a bulldozer and it's got a TV screen and there's a program loaded through CAD and GPS that tells that blade to lift up. When you come to this part of the neighborhood, you're gonna lift up 3 inches. You're gonna move 100 feet and that blade's gonna drop another inch after that. We can get it so accurate now that when we cut out and we do all the grading work and the finished product that's left, you can see where the front porch is going to be because that little 4x4 square piece of land is actually dropped 4 inches lower. There's just that much detail that is now brought into the industry to one, better it. We're getting down to where we can manage stormwater and sewer and water a heck of a lot better because everything is dialed in through technology now.
Listen, in another lifetime, I was a heavy equipment operator. I think that is the coolest thing. And if I could go back in time, I think I would go learn that.
So when you were operating it, did you have anything?
No, I haven't done it. I'm saying I wish I would. In another lifetime, that would be a different career that I take because I think it's so cool. We've done stuff with Gaston County Schools and they have the simulators. Yeah. Oh, that thing was amazing.
We've got one of our site work contractors has a full simulator out there. Yeah, they have a room set up with, I believe they have 3 simulators just so that they can bring people in and test them out on it. We fight for people to work in this industry. We always need more, right?
Oh yeah.
So they found a way to, hey, let's just grab somebody that maybe you bring Morgan in, let's put her in a simulator and see how she does. And you may have a knack for it and boom, you've then picked on a path for being an equipment operator.
So I didn't know that you could actually upload like CAD to the bulldozer stuff though. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So you've got the engineers now that build the complete design set of plans, and then that's put into what they call a model, a GPS model. and that's loaded into the equipment.
Do you think that's helped you guys move the project along a little faster than, before?
Yeah, I would say absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's something that's really neat about that is you can see conflicts in the field that aren't the lines on paper, right? So like there was an instance the other day where we had a guy wire that just was never picked up on a survey. And then we got out there on the equipment. He's just like, hang on a second, that's not my model. How are we going to fix this? So you really can see in real time conflicts as they arise in the field, and then you can solve them quicker.
Does that happen often, like conflicts like that? There's things that disrupt your...
I would love to say no, but that's the job, right?
Morgan said we're problem solvers.
Yeah.
And that's every day there's something that's going to come up on that job site. And it could be a quick fix. It could be a fix that you have to put in place so that it protects you for the next 30 days. But no, that's every day there's a different challenge out there.
And it's all things that cost though. So it just adds into what the house that's going to be in the neighborhood is actually going to cost.
Yeah, you got to look at it this way, is that when we get out on site, we pretty much have all of our costs figured out. So anything that's outside of the what's been talked about is going to be an extra, and you've got to just manage those. And that's the part of our job that we get paid to do, is to manage those so that they are, have the least amount of impact, whether it be economically or time based.
So is there, talking about conflicts and everything, have you ever had anything that made your entire project just stall mid construction, or is there things that could make that happen?
Rock. Rock is the bane of my existence, right? Because a lot of times what will happen is to mitigate rock, what you'll do is you'll come in and you'll drop a couple of different piles in, right? And that gives you maybe 25 foot of depth. And there's these little pinholes throughout the site. That's just such a small snapshot of what it is to get in there and unearth what kind of dirt is under there. You can do test pits, but maybe that's only about 12 feet deep. But when you really start opening up these sites, you just don't quite know exactly what's under there. You could find cars. I've found cars.
I got a Volkswagen Bug.
Yeah.
That's pretty
you
neat.
find, toilets. There's all kinds of stuff that people bury that nobody has any institutional knowledge of anymore, that you get to uncover and figure out what to do with.
Yeah, that'd be probably the ones that come up the most, is that when you go through the whole site development process, and Morgan talks about doing the geotechnical work where you trying to take a 4-inch hole and use that little sample size for acres, right? You're going to miss something.
Oh yeah.
And I punched plenty of holes in this one particular site where I found the Volkswagen Bug. Literally missed everything out there that caused the problem. So I missed the Volkswagen Bug. I missed the pile of tires that were buried at some point in time, just by a foot here or there. So it's interesting that we try to use technology, use our resources to basically take and figure out all the unknowns, but there's always still unknowns out there.
We're just playing Battleship.
Yeah.
That's all we're doing.
It's fun.
And so for you guys playing this ever ongoing game of Battleship, right? What would make y'all's job easier? And in your opinion, what would you change about the land development process today?
Quicker entitlements. Honestly, to me, that's maybe not land development focused, but being able to get through that process more effectively.
The process and the time frame, right? There's a lot of cool things out there that we should be doing. It's kind of, you got to look at land development or just the home building industry, similar to the car industry, right? When you started off driving, you didn't have all these bells and whistles 30 years ago in a car that you do today. I would like to maybe look at how we do land development and say, do we need all those bells and whistles? There might be things like you think back to the time frame of the house you grew up in and compare it to a new residential neighborhood. And you're going to easily probably see 3 things that did not exist in your neighborhood that exist in every single new neighborhood here. I think we kind of need to evaluate some of those and see from a cost perspective if they're truly needed. There's some timing items out there that could be adjusted on do we truly need this? Do we truly need to do this process? And then there's some things there that are going to come into the process. We probably need to do things a little bit better or bring technology more into it. I think seeing technology come into our field and the impact it's going to have in the next probably 3 years with just AI being able to do a lot of stuff out there that maybe was subjective, interpretive. Keep in mind, we deal with inspectors all the time. That's a personal opinion on something. We have brought some items in there that maybe bring testing and equipment into it, but a lot of it is subjective. I'd like to bring it to where it's technical and it's a yes or a no.
Do you think that with using technology, do you think that would make it a little bit more affordable? Will it change the cost if we brought some of that stuff in?
I think it has the opportunity to. And you take, let's go back to the road process, right? We talked about layers. And the process right now to validate the road surface, if it's good or bad, is to load up a dump truck with stone and drive it. And you're going to see how much the land underneath the back tires moves. It moves. No matter how much or how dry the land is or what type of dirt, it's always going to move a little bit. It's that subjective nature, though, that does it move too much or not enough or what have you? And it's that inspector that's making a call. I believe we can bring technology into something like that, and it's a pass or fail. We can put data to the structural ability of that subgrade, and it's not somebody saying yes or no. And I think that'll help bring some costs down.
I think it'd be interesting, and I heard a podcast about this the other day, which is if you could bring AI in and help redesign the way we think about stormwater. So instead of thinking about stormwater as an individual project responsibility, if you kind of step back as a city, how do we look at stormwater holistically? And can you create strategies so that you're using stormwater more efficiently throughout your cities instead of putting it on the individual developer in this example, in each one individual neighborhood, and look at it kind of as a network. Collectively throughout the city. Yeah. I mean, that would be huge on any site.
I think big picture planning overall through all the development and even just the development process in Charlotte, like we have to understand that we are a fast-paced moving market and that we need to look at the big picture.
Be more proactive rather than reactive.
Yes, and think of, we're only left with, the land that we have left it's there, right? We can all see it now. Everything's so built up around us. So you know what you're dealing with. Let's start planning. Let's make better plans and tackle the knowns, right? We know we have only this type of land left.
Yeah. So getting back to the affordability and the cost of things, essentially, like I said earlier, you haven't even built a house yet. And I saw this saying where they said, before a house is built, developers are essentially building a mini city underground first: roads, pipes, drainage, and infrastructure. It's a little city in itself, and it costs a lot of money to do it.
It's shocking. And I want to say I've done two developments, two different municipalities that are all probably in the 200 to 300 unit range. And at the end of the day, just the land development costs on them, one is it's like 25 million, the other one's 35 million. So before we even build a house, there's $35 million worth of material, workers work on that piece of land. And that's what it takes to build these neighborhoods before you even put the first piece of lumber down on the ground.
And these are all things that the home buyers don't even see. They don't even know that it's happening really, unless you listen to our podcast. You won't even know that it's happening. Yeah.
And of that, municipalities got to look at it too. That's brand new roads that have been put into their system that they won't have to touch for many, many years, but they can still claim tax dollars off of it. The utility infrastructure we talked about, that's all donated to the utility operated. So the only thing once we develop that piece of land, the only thing that we really retain is the lot. Everything else is given to the municipality.
How much of the land development, say percentage wise, actually is accounted to the house, the price of the house?
You've got the old school, everything is relative because it's based on location, right? Are you paying so much for your land? So once you back that out, the old school kind of train of thought was 20 to 30%. So 20 to 30% of your house cost should be your land.
Is that pretty standard? Have you seen it
so
more?
Subjective.
The 20 is so low right now.
Really?
Yeah.
And the
it's
30
so hard
is.
To answer that.
Yeah. It truly is. Now, and why we have a hard time answering that question is you go from one municipality to the next, and the criteria for that mini city you're talking about underground is completely different. So there's not a one-to-one comparison. Yeah. It's kind of, you've always got to weigh out apples and oranges.
I mean, but 20 to 30% isn't cheap either. I'm like you saying, for that one development, you have $35 million just for what, like 200 houses, and then divide that up, and then 30% of each of those houses. I mean, that's a pretty penny.
And I think it's come out in some of the previous podcasts too, but I would say an average lot cost in Charlotte is probably 130,000, just for that developed neighborhood that's in a decent part of town.
Yeah.
It's a lot of good information. It's a lot of.
Well, and I feel like too, a lot of times maybe there could be a misconception that like a developer comes in and says, I want to build this house here. And really it's just a math equation working in the opposite direction. Mm-hmm. Instead of starting with, I want to build this here, it's like, how much is it going to cost me to buy it? How much is it going to cost me to do everything that is called dirt down, all of the horizontal costs? How much is it going to cost me to build the house? How much do I have to sell this house for in order to outrun all of those costs? And really, you run that math equation backwards. So you don't start with the house. You start with everything it costs. How much do I have to sell this house for? Does it make sense to do this project or not?
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Well, guys, thank y'all so much for coming on today. That was really, really informative. And I guess for the viewers at home, we have more puzzle pieces for you. We're going to keep bringing more and more on every week. But thank y'all so much for coming on. And thank you guys so much for listening to the Framing the Issue podcast, a podcast put on by the Home Builders Association of Greater Charlotte and the Young Professional Council. Go and take a listen on any of the platforms you listen on, whether it be Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, and go check out our website because it'll be on there too. But until the next one, we'll see you guys later. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.